We got to talk again about, so what's happening with
No,
FEC?
I started the agitation for preparedness month, so I sent out a
We
bunch
are
of
going
notes.
live now. The streaming has begun.
Yeah, would you?
So, welcome everyone. This is what is it today? August 31st, MBTC Legislative and Policy Committee. I am your chair, Kanik, and we are starting at 6:09 p.m. Of course, we're live streaming through our YouTube channel. And I believe, Ms. Matthijs, we do have quorum.
We do.
We have quorum, so we can go ahead and get started. Our first agenda item is our May 17th, 2023 MBTC Legislative and Policy Committee summary. If everyone wants to take a quick minute to take a look and let us know if there's any questions, comments, concerns, amendments, edits.
Memory was that there wasn't anything to. We all do.
With the approval of Ms. Garvey, I think we'll go ahead and move on. If there's no amendments.
Yep, so moved.
So now we could go ahead to agenda item number 2, which is our general assembly outlook, and we have our legislative liaison, Ms. Phil Seibert, and
Yes. Hi, everybody. Good evening. We'll try to give you a little bit of an overlook. I think, obviously, we all know what's going on, but I'll try to be a little bit more specific. Obviously, the biggest thing that's happening currently is that we have a budget. We will be played back next Wednesday to vote on that in the General Assembly. No one has seen the budget, but there is a budget. So,
Is that good or bad?
how do you know?
Are you sure?
Nobody's seen it. How do you know?
It's sort of like a tree falling in the woods, but I mean, it's there. It's in it. But
Money, I
so
hope.
hopefully we'll see. So they have a rule. It has to be public 48 hours before they vote on it. So maybe I think the worst case scenario is we see that Monday morning. I think when all the half sheets come out. Obviously, even worst case scenario, it means all staff will have to work all over Labor Day weekend to do that. So I'm sure they're super excited that this is when they decided to finish the budget. Was Labor Day weekend. So anyway, so hopefully we might see it before that. Maybe we'll see it tomorrow or maybe over the weekend. But the idea we'll see it like the half sheets and what's in there. This will be obviously on top of the skinny budget we passed in March, and then this will be what we see at the end. And so that'll be a big deal to kind of get that, I think, off everybody's plate and kind of be able to move on. Although I think it's going to be very difficult for everybody to implement anything with any money. By the time the money gets out the door, it's going to be January. So anyway, it'll be tough, but hopefully we'll be able to get some money on the streets and it'll help localities, et cetera. We don't expect big things in transportation. Obviously, there weren't any big things this year. We don't expect anything to be in there. For example, like there's not going to be any metro money or any of that kind of stuff. So I don't want to set any expectations. We'll just say that is not happening. Just to be clear. But that was the stuff that wasn't considered. They weren't going to add that to this budget, even though they were 6 months behind. But so anyway, I'm sure Senator Evan, who I won't put on the spot at the moment, but could tell us a little bit more. But I was just telling them the budget will be next Wednesday. We probably expect that at the latest we'll see it would be Monday morning because it's 48 hours in advance. So maybe over the weekend, but potentially probably mostly Monday morning. So and so then with that, obviously we're fast approaching election season, which is in November. As you guys all are very familiar with, we have obviously brand new districts for everybody. So obviously a huge deal, about there's probably about 13 really competitive seats in the House of Delegates and about 4 in the Senate. And so, grand total, what we're looking at, low end, just number, there'll be 48 new members of the General Assembly over the House and the Senate. So 48, that's the lowest we could have. That is 15 members of the House and 32 members in the 50 members in the Senate and 33 members in the House. Then it could go up to as high as 55 if we lose a bunch of incumbents who have competitive seats this fall. So somewhere between 48 and 55 new people is a huge, huge number, obviously. we've never had that changeover like that. I think the last time we had that was Reconstruction, so. So huge, that's a huge deal for all of us, and obviously trying to get people, and in Northern Virginia, we have a lot of new people, and so there's gonna be quite a learning curve, which we are trying to do our best to, meet people and and go even talk to the folks who are veterans and to make sure that MBTC is in the priorities mind as a resource, especially for transit in Virginia. So we're working on that. Kate and I had some meetings today. We've got some meetings tomorrow. We're gonna keep doing as many of those as we can. I have been going around and trying to meet as many new people as I possibly can, and always mention that this is one of the people I work with, and if you have questions about NBTC, Metro, BRE, please. So we've been really trying to do a good job on that, just trying to get ahead of January. So if you guys have any questions about that, I'm happy to talk about it, but that's really what we're trying to do.
Quick question. So you have all this change over, do you have all staff changes over too, or do sometimes some people stay who maybe know the ropes a bit?
So like the committee staff, so there's not a lot of committee. Yeah. So the committee staff usually stays the same because that's that they are, committee staff comes from the House and the Senate clerk's office. Those stay the same, and then the money committees will have the same members too. Now, if there is a change in leadership, there can be some changes in the money committees in staff. And there potentially could be, I guess, changes in like the clerks too. Not in the Senate though. No one's gonna get rid of Susan Shar, I don't think, ever. And then,
I think what Libby might be, I don't know if you're asking this, people have individual legislative aides, and a lot of them, of the people who've been retiring, like Senator, say Senator Sazar or Senator Howell, have been there, or even Senator Spruill, have been there a long time and tend to retire with them, but some of them will stay and help new members.
Yeah, that my question was kind of all of the above. I'm just kind of wondering.
But the staff on the subject matter staff for appropriations, finance, and transportation, no reason to expect any turnover there or any significant turnover there.
Yeah, so especially in legislative services. Yeah, like those attorneys will still be there. Those folks. That's right. So that is helpful. But as you know, with these big changes, I mean, with the way the houses are, they're so close already. There's a lot of people. I mean, there could be changes in leadership on both sides, which would therefore mean not only all these new folks, but we could have all new chairs, and that would be a huge deal too. So I think that's something that we're all kind of looking at, like how close could this be? It can be really close, to be honest. I don't think anybody knows. I think the races have all been, like, to date, are pretty tight, both in the House and the Senate. So that could be, so that's a big deal. So, obviously having all that stuff switch over would be significant for us. And even if for example, if the Senate keeps, the Democrats keep control, we'll still have a lot of changes in the committee chairs because a lot of folks are leaving. So we're going to have a lot of new committee chairs and chairmen and chairwomen. And so that's going to be a big deal too. Like Senator Marsden could easily move over to Commerce and Labor.
I expect that. Yep. Put a chair perhaps on the committee if we're.
That's right. So anyway, a lot of change. The new General Assembly building is also going to open, so that's exciting. They're going to open that to the public on October 11th. Yay! So there's apparently also the fall. There's going to be a lot of changeover, so all the staff is going to be moving over there. There's going to be some concerns about committees and stuff like that, like their commissions and stuff will be probably for law when they do that. So that building will be open, so that means it'll actually be open for this session.
That's great.
That is
and
great.
The governor comes up with a new budget this time too, right?
That's right. And we get a brand new budget from the governor on December 20th.
But did you talk at all about Secretary Miller's proposal to change Smart Scale? I got an email earlier today. I don't know if this is the appropriate time or if you want, maybe wait to the end of your presentation.
No, I mean, this is the end of my presentation. So, perfect.
I got an email that Chet Miller was leading a process to reduce Smart Scale, and the biggest change is to eliminate land use from scoring methodology for project recommendations. And then I have a July presentation, and it says they demonstrated the proposed criteria defund transit, bike, and pedestrian projects and put significantly more money into large road widenings. And they intend to adopt this in December, which is before our next session, so we can't change it then, and if we do something after the fact, it could presumably be vetoed or interfered with by the governor if we wanted to. That we don't have much of a say in it. Sorry to be fair about this.
I appreciate hearing about that. We knew they'd been working, that's the first that I'd heard, so we'll obviously want to look into that.
He's taking out land use from consideration completely, or just Like, how do you, I mean, I thought,
I was gonna forward it to you two to look at, but I haven't read the whole thing, but I got this from a colleague earlier.
is it not statutorily required to be considered?
I think they have the right to just,
I think you have to, I mean, it's a good question. I don't, I mean, gosh, I mean, it's been a while since I've looked at the smart scale, like, language, but I thought that there had to be considerations. Because remember, like, back in the day, like, when, like, Jim LeMonion always wanted to change, like,
Yeah.
make congestion higher. Remember how, like, there was a lot of
Right.
talk about making those percentages higher? I thought that was something that had to be done by the legislature.
I don't know whatever leeway the secretary has.
Okay.
Like you state.
Okay. Okay, all right, okay, we'll look at that. Thank you.
Some adjustment in some of our priority discussion.
I had a quick question. Once the new folks are sworn in, how long does it typically take to like get all the assignments? Does it happen first month, first week?
Great question. So they all get sworn in like right there at the beginning, and so I think it will depend on whether each house keeps the current leadership. Like if the Republicans keep the House and the Senate, the Democrats keep the Senate, I think it'll be a whole lot easier and smoother because then they'll just kind of plug people into the committees and that will be a little bit smoother. If there is a big changeover either way, like if the House goes Democratic and the Senate goes Republican or vice versa, or if there's just any sort of mix, it'll be more difficult and a little bumpier because then you've got like just full changeover. You've got chairs that'll change and then the percentages change too, and then who's on there and they move people by seniority. So, but that all usually happens that first week of session. Yeah, I mean, usually it's like the first day, but it might be a little bit longer just depending on, like, I'm just thinking back to 2020. 2020 was pretty chaotic. And we had that took a little bit longer in the House. The Senate was easy peasy because they didn't have a changeover. But when the Democrats took over, they changed everything. And so that took a little bit longer. We didn't have committees, I don't think, until the second week of session. Is that right? Yeah, it's like the second week of session. Yeah. So they got a little bit of a slower start. So it could be that way. It just depends on if the leadership remains the same, meaning the parties are the same, it's a little bit smoother. But if that switches, that's usually a much bigger deal from just a filling out standpoint. And there's just so many open seats too, like on all those things.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be a lot of there's gonna be a lot of movement. And seniority is usually how we continue to do it. So yeah.
My understanding is they're changing the amount of weight
Okay.
to basically make it like nil, so that it's as if they are getting rid of it.
Okay.
As part of
Okay.
the application. Mechanism. Why we vote.
I know that may not have been, not sure folks, because we're doing this on YouTube, so the understanding is that the percentage weight that's being put to land use is almost gone down to zero. I was actually thinking, because I do recall in legislation, each of those criteria are identified, but not the weights. So I could see how that can still be, if you put 1% or I don't know, I don't know what it is. But the CTB, so they'll be putting something out, there will be opportunity for public comment. Senator Evans, did you say that it was December was when they were potentially, they will be up here in Northern Virginia, the CTB will be up in Northern Virginia in October, just to put that out there. But obviously we will
They
dive in.
intend to adopt this in December is what I was told.
Okay, so there may be some public comment opportunities on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Ms. Barbie.
I'm not asking a question, I apologize. How likely is it, you got a whole lot of new people in, a lot of change, that they'll decide that they want to like change the rules about how they organize things as well, which has happened in the past, like, I think they've limited the number of bills, which is probably smart. I mean, how likely is that to happen as well on top of everything else? You've got a lot of different people with maybe new ideas about how to do
The
things.
rules, there are a procedural resolution for the session has already been adopted. And in the Senate, we did adopt in the Rules Committee a rule about how many bills you could do, but I don't think whatever in terms of numbers of bills and in the way that things basically run, I would think we'll know in advance.
And how committees are balanced out and all that stuff.
Well,
That's
that
all.
it could change But the rules, there's traditions in both bodies that, I mean, we have some committees that are lopsided now under Democratic majority, and we did that because that's how the Republicans did them. So things flip over. I don't think they would change it. I mean, I don't think they would change it back. So I think we're likely to have similar ratios to what we have now, unless based on who's elected. I mean, if you had like, you won't, but if you had a landslide one way or the other, they would be entitled to even more on the committees that are not already lopsided.
And it's, as you say, it's basically done by tradition. So you get a whole new group and it doesn't like tradition, they could then change stuff.
Well, in the House, I think it might be in the rules that they have proportional representation. In the Senate, it could change, but I don't anticipate it would.
Okay.
And unless the proportionality of the whole body
Changes.
flipped, then you would expect, you know, I mean, if you had 2/3 one party or the other, you would expect that they would get 2/3 of the Transportation Committee. But the Finance Committee is already fairly lopsided in favor of the majority party, no matter how close it is.
Commerce and labor, like, there's a couple of things, education and health. So, I mean, and that was something, so it used to be proportional in the Senate too. It used to be much more proportional. And then when the parties were going back and forth, those couple of years that they kept going back and forth, they started flipping them to be more, like much less proportional.
some of the committees are proportional.
Some of them are.
But the more powerful ones are a little
Right,
lopsided.
but the House is proportional. So,
Yeah. I think I'm remembering those days when it was like they switched the rules and changed it.
2012 started like back and forth.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much, Amy.
Yeah, of course.
We're gonna go ahead and move to our next item on the agenda, which is our main product that this committee produces is our annual legislative and policy agenda. And as you may know, this governs the state and federal issues that we can actively support during the Virginia General Assembly session, as well as in the U.S. Congress. Some of you may have heard that there's an issue with some of the funding for WMATA. You know, hopefully that's crossed your radar at some point. But you know, we've pressed the GM from WMATA, Randy Clark, to go back and look at some other options prior to FY 2025, so that we can have a sense of what Maryland, DC, feds, as well as ourselves in Virginia need to do in terms of addressing some of the funding issues. We do not have any update from WMATA, but we are actively engaged in discussions on what FY 25 would look like. And strategy to collectively work on to be successful across all parts of government. I'm anticipating that we will be coming back to this committee in October, if not beforehand, to kind of refine that specific ask regarding the WMATA funding. We also have other policy priorities that we want to make sure MVTC is focused on. And as such, I'd like to turn things over to our executive director, Ms. Kate Mattice, to give us an update on some of the other legislative and policy topics at MVTC.
So I do have, there's a handout in front of you, and the front of it touches on initial priorities. What we did was we reflected upon what we've done in the past, and then also being sort of mindful of things that we anticipate in the future. Obviously with a caveat, if there are some things we need to be looking at in terms of smart scale, let's examine those things. We'll see how that rolls in here. So again, as we wait to hear the redefinition, if there is any changes to WMATA with a specific ask, we in general like to keep things at a very high level because things can change a lot during General Assembly. So our first one is very much focused on advocating for long-term sustainable dedicated funding from the state, as well as flexibilities if needed to other revenue opportunities, whether they be local or otherwise, to ensure WMATA. And then I wanted to put in VOE and other Northern Virginia transportation systems that they're constantly able to meet the needs of public transit in our region. So that first one intended to be a very high level, but it is getting about long-term sustainable dedicated funding for all of those systems. The second one is to protect the state funding of public transit in Northern Virginia and ensure the growth in the Commonwealth Transportation Fund. If you recall, in 2020, there was an omnibus transportation bill that identified 9 different sources of funding that could be used, and then a reallocation so that Department of Rail and Public Transit got a percentage of that overall pot. There were some reductions to that pot and the elimination of grocery tax. So we're really mindful of what that looks like moving forward. The revenues have been sustainable right now, but we want to make sure we don't lose that as other things happen. So that's what the second one's about. The third one is making sure that nothing in the law changes NVTC as an organization, what we do, the programs we have, the responsibilities that we have, and again, the funding sources that we have here at NVTC.
Okay, you may
Yes.
want to be more specific about the toll revenue and the programs both inside and outside the Beltway on 66.
Okay.
And 95, you may want to be specific about maintaining that.
Okay. And that was what was intended within this, but you think we need to be a little bit more specific? Okay.
If it's intended, it's whether you want to be specific or not.
Okay.
It's up to you.
All right.
I want to make sure that we were focused on that because
Yeah.
those are pretty important programs now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll see what we can do on some words in that area. The next one, again, is sort of looking out for our VRE part of NVTC, which is continuing to support the state investment for the Transforming Rail in Virginia and other passenger rail initiatives. And then finally, and this is something that we've had for the last couple of years, is we obviously, any of the innovations that our transit systems want to look into, whether they be zero and low emission buses, fare payment, transit signal, all those other technology things, we obviously want to encourage funding for those from the state. So that is what we have right now. What I do want to do, per Senator Evans' discussion, is dive into and see what we're looking at. And we will come back with a proposed line related to ensuring transit's, effective participation in smart scale. Obviously, I've got to look and see what they put out there. But I'll already just offer that one as another one to have in there. But that is what we have initially for the state. And so, Mr. Chair, I'm going to pause right here.
Any questions on state level stuff? for Ms. Mattias?
All right, thank you. At the federal level, as a reminder, WMATA and VRE in particular, they do receive formula funding from the federal government, and as well as we're starting to see some of our localities, including DASH and others, playing in the federal discretionary grant programs space. So what we have in here is including to maximize our region's access to the transportation programs and the competitive grant opportunities. So again, in ways in which we can endorse and support those grants as they go through. The next two are really about the role of the federal government within our transit network and how much we rely on the movement of federal employees. So the first one is exploring, and this is something that we have actually been working with WMATA as well as MTA, the Maryland Transit folks as well, is to identify ways in which we could capture some transit funding that has been lost by the reduction in federal transit benefits. And so what we have here is, sort of recognizing the importance of public transit in basically the fact that we have this network that allows people to get to and use federal agencies and facilities. This would be to identify and secure federal long-term funding opportunities that benefit our local transit systems, including WMATA and VRE. And so just a little bit of background on that. Prior to the pandemic, the National Capital Area, the federal facilities of the National Capital Area were providing over $150 million a year in transit benefits that went into our transit systems here in Northern Virginia. The budget last year was less than $50 million. And so that's real money that's going into all of our transit systems. So this is what we're exploring. Is there a way to capture back? And then the next bullet I'll talk about gets another way, which is capturing back the federal employees and their return to work. But this is something that I know that our colleagues at WMATA are very interested in, as others. Is there a way to capture from the federal agencies this lost revenue that had been budgeted back in 19? So the third one here again is encouraging federal return to work policies, and specifically those that focus on transit use. We actually put this in last year. And one of the things that we could get to that level of granularity is about spreading that return to work throughout the week. I know our friends at VRE are seeing, as many of our other systems are, you have a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you have a little bit on Monday and nobody on Friday. It's very difficult to run a transit system on a 2 or 3 day a week setup. And so that idea of encouraging both transit back to work as well as having that spread throughout the week. As I say, and Mr. Walkinshaw has spoke to this before about legislative priorities. We know this is obviously very important to the transit agencies that do have a commuter focus, like VRE. And then finally, the last one of the federal priorities is continuing support for these commuter tax benefits. And what we have in here is both the public and private sector. I think that there's incredible opportunities for the private sector, especially within the greater DC area, to be leveraging transit benefits. Right now, again, I think all of our localities provide those to employees. Federal government does, by law, have to provide transit benefits. It is not clear how much the private sector actually takes advantage of those, and I think that's something that's an interesting conversation. Things like the university passes and others are starting to grow, but we wanted to keep this in here, expanding it to private as among the federal priorities. So that's what we have for the federal.
Let's go.
Is there a way on the federal, I mean, I get, I get it, it's really hard when people come in 3 days a week and not 4. I mean, it's just, you know, as you described. When we present it that way, it's like, you guys need to have this schedule to help us. Whereas actually transit's meant to be servicing people. Is there some way we can turn it around how the federal government will work better, or offices will work better, or people's lives? I mean, some way to make it focus not on what we want them to do for us, but what we can do for them. And I don't have an answer, but I'm just thinking that it's sounding like it's a lot about you need to do this for us, and people say, well, wait a minute, transit's meant to help people do what they want to do. I bet Mr. Walkinshaw's been thinking about this.
Yeah, I heard that. You know, we've had a lot of this conversation a lot at VRE.
Yeah.
I think we have to serve the users that exist. I do think it's reasonable for us to say that if the federal government expects us to continue to operate these transit systems, Metro and VRE, successfully, then their return to work policies have an impact. I don't think we should get into how many days per week federal employees are in the office. I do think it's reasonable for us to point out that it's difficult to operate systems when everybody wants to be in the office on Wednesday and nobody wants to be in the office on Friday, for example, because we have to have the capacity to serve the days when everyone shows up. And then we have completely, in the VRE situation, almost completely empty trains on Fridays because no one goes to work, and we're still spending all that money. So if you want us to run trains or buses on Wednesday, you're going to have to help us out in terms of spreading. And I think there's a reasonable case to be made there too, that from an operational perspective, if you look at some of the OMB memos that have come out, they do recognize that federal government will work better if people are working. Not, that it's not just
Like if you call the
Tuesdays and
federal
Wednesdays,
government on
right?
Friday,
Yeah,
somebody's there.
People still have to get things done
Like
on
their
Friday
taxes done and,
Monday. So I've kind of tried to shift it a little bit that way. I did see that there was a COG letter.
I'll have to share that, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I won't step on your line, but
So 23 of the localities in the under the Council of Governments, their chief administrative officers have sent a letter to OMB yesterday. Pretty much the argument being is that we're back at work many days a week. All of our localities and the staff within our localities are back to work. And so we urge the federal government to do the same sort of things that our local governments are doing. And that was just sent through from COG yesterday.
yeah, I'm not on the COG board. I wish that the letter had also pointed out this issue of which days people are working and trying to encourage agencies to spread that out a little bit, because I think long term that's going to be increasingly an issue, assuming the kind of 3-day-a-week norm continues, which seems to be what we're moving towards. If 3 days are Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then hardly anybody on Monday and Friday, it's very challenging to run systems that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or the government. Yeah.
Yeah, I think good point. And it's just the note that I'm always, the one note I'm always pounding away at. The second one under federal priorities, recognize the importance of public transit, and then you go on to accessing federal. Under state priorities, it seems to me there ought to be a bullet there, recognizing the importance of public transit to, I don't know, keeping this economic engine going. I mean, we just talk about this over and over again, or I do. I go fine, tired of me, stop talking about it. But I really do keep thinking that many people in the state do not understand how important it is. And that would include people in Northern Virginia. There are a lot of there's a number of dots to connect, and people don't tend to naturally do that. It's not part of their life.
And so one of the things, in this, of course, is just priorities for our active engagement with the General Assembly and the federal government. But we do have the work that, of course, we presented to this body and to the full commission on our value transit to the Commonwealth, and that is something that we've actually been putting in the hands of anybody and everybody. And it was, I think pretty much every time Chair McKay makes a conversation, speaks publicly about public transit, he brings that out. And so we're working on even some more visual tools and other things. So that making the case is something that we have been doing very loud. As Amy mentioned earlier in the meeting, she and I have been meeting with a number of folks from the delegation. Right in those packets, one pager and the slides has all the findings from that in different ways that we presented. So yeah. And obviously we continue to encourage all of you to speak to the 1.5 billion in sales and income tax that go to the Commonwealth because we can support strong economic activity.
Yeah. I think some people could come and sit in traffic for a while, try to get somewhere. Getting on Metro and just kind of cruising on by there. It's kind of better than.
And hopping on a scooter to get, that last mile.
There you go.
Any other questions for Ms. Mattias on the? Going to go ahead and move us on along to our fourth agenda item then, which is our MVTC legislative events. As Kate noted, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for MVTC to define as well as communicate priorities and some of these events and milestones.
So just on the backside of the priorities paper, we basically identified some key milestones and dates, activities that are going on, because we really are keeping an eye all the way through session. And so obviously this is initial conversation that's going on right now. We do have a WMATA committee meeting later this month. So again, as we continue to refine and work with WMATA on what that's looking like in terms of their financial things, those are going to be some important meetings. On October 19th, we do plan on having a joint legislative and WMATA committee meeting. So that's where we really hope to hone down and refine any messages associated with that. And just as a reminder, yes, there may be a funding ask, but a lot of the work, and I know we do have some commissioners here who are also on the WMATA committee, is also talking about opportunities for improving cost effectiveness, leveraging other internal cost savings, and so that sort of is a part of that whole package, and that's why we wanted to do a joint meeting, is because some of those may have a legislative element to them. November 2nd is when we're going to be presenting the legislative and policy agenda just as a presentation, sort of the workshopping of it at our November 2nd commission meeting. Obviously, we're mindful of the following Tuesday or general elections, and we may, as we often do, is leave the opportunity to have sort of a post-election debrief. We'll obviously work with you on calendars and see how that plays out. So we do anticipate something a little bit later in November. We do know that things like bill pre-filing deadlines are coming up fast and furious. And so we want to, if there's something that needs to be happening, we want to have that in the works. We do have our joint legislative forum. It is this year a Friday morning, not a Monday. And it is here in Arlington at the Schar School at George Mason, which is right across the street from the Metro. And so thanks to our friends down at PRTC, they have a tendency to put all of their commissioners on a bus. And so we said, can you bring the bus up a little bit more so we're on a place near Metro? So so we're happy to host it there.
Arlington, thanks you.
So we're happy, it's a different venue. So it's going to be December 1st, Friday, December 1st. We're doing save the dates are going to be going out next week.
And will all the people who are newly elected be invited?
We are planning right now, our save the date's going to be going out to every candidate in Northern Virginia so that at least they get it on their calendar. And so obviously after the elections,
you have their contact info? Do you need that?
So I think that somebody's working on it. Yeah.
It might say, there's a book published called Elect No Strangers where they list all the candidates' mailing addresses. And I don't have it with me, but I can tell you how to get it afterwards.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that is the hope, is that what we're going to be doing is emailing all candidates, so obviously, we're going to make the assumption those that have won will want to be coming, so we just want to make sure we don't wait too long on that. At this time, we are hoping to have a guest speaker that maybe from the business community, we're working on that, as well as then have a moderated session with Randy Clark from WMATA, Rich Dalton from VRE, and Bob Schneider from OmniRide. And so obviously we're just pulling that together, but the save the dates will be going out next week. The approval of our legislative agenda will be at our commission meeting on December 7th. And then we really start focusing on strategy and obviously working with all of you if there are specific things that Amy needs to help us with down in Richmond. Just moving ahead, Virginia Transit Association does have their transit advocacy date scheduled for January 22nd. I'm gonna think that's a Monday, because they usually are on Mondays, right? And so that can be a great opportunity to go down, and there's usually a really nice reception in the evening. So I know a number of you have been to that in the past. The other thing is that we would like to do our commission meeting down in Richmond this year. We think this is a fantastic opportunity for a meet and greet with the new. So all the commissioners who would like to come down, obviously we'd love to be able to have a quorum. If not, we would probably just have a gathering. We'll make sure that we don't have any critical action items, but to have the commissioners come down and have that opportunity to invite members of the General Assembly to meet with all of us. So that's just very early in the works. Obviously, buildings are new and we need to figure out logistics. But I did want to put that on your radar because that's something that we're excited to. We did that for many years. The COVID sort of threw things off a little bit, but we're hoping to do that. And we think that this year is a good year to do it because of all the new members that are down there. And then again, obviously, General Assembly goes, right now we anticipate going through March 9th. And so we obviously have an eye on all that. So I'm happy to answer any questions or get any suggestions about our Richmond activities. Yes.
The October 19th meeting, is that going to be at 6 o'clock? I had a conflict. I was just wondering, is 6 o'clock our designated time for that?
Did you want it earlier?
If it's possible to do it earlier, I've pledged to be on time.
The time of the legislature, I can look it up at my, see if I can look it on my, what time is that? Is that currently at 6 p.m.?
I don't know if everyone else has a problem getting here, if they've come to something else or not.
Yeah, I don't mind doing it earlier if you want to set that up something.
Okay, we'll see.
I'm doing one of our joint is, let me go look. I
Yeah,
think one of our joint.
I have it from 6 to 7:30 as the save the date on my calendar, so, but Rhonda is the one that does an amazing job corralling everybody's calendars, and so let's look at the opportunities that we have, and see if we can,
She not only corrals us, she feeds us.
I would never complain having an earlier meeting, but I do also know that folks have day jobs that
I feel like
preclude.
Matt still pull to make 5 o'clock.
We'll see if we can find out, yeah.
It doesn't have to be determined now, but I just wanted
Yeah.
to raise it.
No,
No, I
it's fine.
appreciate that.
I actually, that would actually help me out.
Question, Kate, so I think it's great if we have a speaker. You mentioned somebody from the business community, which then makes me think, that's right. Where's the business community? So like on the smart scale, I mean, I would think the chambers and the business community would have I feel sometimes they're absent, they're just kind of AWOL. They don't really help us out. They're not in there, but yet they depend on us to be here doing this. Is there, how are we doing with that?
Metro funding.
Some corralling of the private sector to try and help them come lobby on our behalf for a few different things, but if you want to.
Yeah, so we've been talking, obviously, just like we're hoping and pressing on Metro to refine what sort of the immediate and longer term needs are. A number of members of the Board of Trade, the various chambers here within Nova Chamber and Arlington Chamber, everybody, we've been actually having a lot of conversations one-on-one, again, talking about Valley Transit. So this is definitely on the radar. I think that many of the business groups are probably where we are is refining what is the ask, so we know what we're talking about. But I think that's something we're going to continue to press upon, is working with the business community and articulating what a good, solid, funded transit network means for business. But there are a number of folks in the business space that are diving into this issue. And so I expect that there's going to be more activity in this space over the fall.
Because I think that, I agree in that, the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the other MBTC, the Technology Council, and other local chambers should, on Metro, like if we were ever gonna have, say, a dedicated source of funding, we couldn't have a solution without their support or maybe even without their input.
Yeah. And I did actually say that quite pointedly you were there.
Absolutely. As I say, yeah.
Everybody in this room, all right, you guys.
The topic came up at the
Texas
chamber
is
event
going,
over
yeah.
at Marymount University
Right.
this last week. And so having Chair McKay, even Chair Randall, I mean, there was
Everybody was the same
everybody was the
page.
same. There was a really good conversation about that. And that was the right audience there. And so, and again, we're doing a number of one-on-one, and have since we released our value transit funding. So we've been having, smaller conversations and briefings over the course of the summer.
So just because I'm not hearing anything doesn't mean things aren't happening. So it's good. That's fine. Yeah.
Cannot say it enough.
Yeah.
Another question? Any other events to?
No, I was gonna say, I mean, I think really we're excited to have as many new members join us for the December 1st briefing. I think that's very important. And again, so far that we can put together, something in Richmond for a meet and greet opportunity, and find a place, do our commission meeting now that there's a new building down there. I'm excited to see how we can make that happen.
Maybe we got like Senator Warner saying to come that might be.
Aren't you guys a good job? Meet your commissioners.
Flatter me all the time, but I don't believe it all the time. But thank you.
All right, no other questions. We'll go ahead and move to the last item, which is basically just confirming, something on your mind that you want to bring up, legislative policy related, not just general, hey, you know what?
Well, just someone mentioned Smart Scale, and I apologize for being late and maybe I missed this, but I was at VACO last week. And there was a woman from VDOT, I guess, who's overseeing kind of the process whereby they're looking at Smart Scale, and there's a room full of county supervisors, predominantly rural, all saying Smart Scale is unfairly weighted for Virginia, and the system is such that bike and ped projects, and that I suspect there are maybe in the administration, based on some of the things Secretary Miller said, maybe sympathetic to that. I haven't followed it closely, but there seems to be like a real risk there, that a process that I think from our perspective is already challenging for us, given land acquisition costs and other unique challenges we have, even worse. So maybe I missed this whole conversation.
You did.
Okay, so you all. Yeah, well, I'll just say I was in.
And it's hot off the press.
Yeah.
Really, like we just heard about it at the
Yeah,
beginning of this
Senator
meeting. Senator
Evans
Evans
shared it,
informed.
yeah.
Well, definitely every supervisor from a rural jurisdiction has the same talking points, and they are hammering it.
Heavily, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
This suggests maybe that we think about, some sort of a strategy to deal with this, and you can, because we may add some additional trips and meetings to make a point. I mean, if we need to go to Richmond to make a point, I think we should do it. So, I'm also disturbed by this constant rhetoric that ignores the reality of the flow of money and the things like the local composite index, which really disadvantages Northern Virginia. I mean, if anybody has any ideas about how to get an honest dialogue going with other parts of the state or those supervisors, are there people we can reach out to? I don't know. Maybe it's naive, but it's
frustrating.
It's frustrating, and it's not constructive for anybody, really. They make great politics, but lousy policy. So, in any event, if anybody has any ideas, but if we need to really ramp up
Yeah.
our activities in that area, please let us know.
Yeah, I mean, if they're saying that smart scale unfairly punishes or penalizes rural jurisdictions, we've got to be saying the opposite, right? I mean, we've got to be saying that actually we're getting the short end of the stick. And I can say about 2 or 3 sentences on that. I can talk about land acquisition costs. I can talk about in the last cycle, we didn't have anything. But those are the only 2 things I could say. So it might be useful for us to kind of have some of the data in terms of
Yeah,
why
I was gonna
actually
say,
it's not working for Northern Virginia. It needs to be better for us.
Do we have presence usually at Baker? You go to Baker sometimes, do you?
just for the day down in Richmond, but
So maybe it might have been, I mean, maybe, VACO has these conferences, we've got one and there's like, maybe the NDTC needs to have a VACO presence somehow, do a workshop on something, maybe, just a thought.
Yeah, I think here, I mean, really
no.
was, I'm going to keep any of that language like out of the VACO policy agenda, but the important thing is VDOT was hearing it from.
No, that's what I mean, and they're all here, it was an echo chamber, yeah, it was an echo chamber, and there wasn't anything, and obviously, if they're all coming like that, somebody's been doing work outside and ahead of time, right?
Especially if they all had the same talking points.
No, it's like, we're totally flat-footed in a way.
I absolutely, I mean, I want to explore the communication that Senator Evan just got, and learn a little bit more. We know the Virginia Transit Association has been part of a stakeholder group, in reviewing Smart Scale, because we've actually had conversations. But to get, and perhaps for the benefit of Mr. Walkinshaw, is that the announcement was that, land use would be effectively zeroed out in terms of the scoring. And so just want to get a chance to look at that and see what that looks like.
Yeah.
And then I'll come back with sort of, in terms of timeline, obviously talking to the administration. But this is somewhat new. We've been hearing some things about Smart Scale, but not to this level. So this is
Well, it's another one where we get the business community engaged, because I was at the thing with Secretary Miller and I heard him say, a lot of these bike projects, they seem nice, but the cost benefit doesn't make sense. And I actually said to him, I said, there are hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in Tyson's and Reston and National Landing that are existing because corporations know we're committed to building these kind of communities that are walkable and bikeable oriented. Like, that's the benefit of these projects. And maybe that's different on the say, but I think he needs to hear that maybe from people other than us.
Maybe like Amazon.
Right.
I mean, that's part of the reason that they came. That's right. What we may be seeing, seems we're just kind of a little bit gloomy, but once everything changes over, we're losing all the seniority in Northern Virginia, right? So the next General Assembly will have a lot less out from Northern Virginia. And it feels like maybe the rest of the state is getting ready right now for that time. So we could be in trouble. What could save us is that if they do realize that we are the economic engine for the state, and we all better hang together. We're going to hang separately. But I think we've got a challenge ahead. I'm not quite sure how to do it, but think about coming to VACO and a few things like that. We need to get some talking to each other.
Any other burning topics?
Happy discussion.
All right, so just a friendly reminder before we adjourn, next meeting will be the 19th, but stay tuned. If we're gonna do 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock, Rhonda will be so kind as to inform everyone as to what time the next meeting will be. But with that, I think we're all done.
we are all done. Our commission meeting's next Thursday.
Yep.
Thank you.
We'll meet next Thursday. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.